I never believed in love at first sight. As a photographer, I'm trained to look past surface appearances, to find the story behind the image. I guess that's why I was so blindsided when it happened to me. My name is Ethan Wright, and this is the story of how I fell in love, got married, and lost everything, including my wife's memory. At least, that's what she wanted me to believe. 3 years ago, I was focused solely on building my career as an architectural photographer. My work took me around the world, capturing the soul of buildings for prestigious magazines and wealthy clients. I lived out of suitcases, chased perfect light across continents, and kept emotional entanglements to a minimum. My mother, Diana, always worried I was lonely, but I told her I was married to my work. In reality, I was the son of a construction worker who died in an accident when I was 10. I'd worked too hard to get where I was to risk it all for something as unpredictable as love. Then my mother called in a favor. Her old college friend needed someone to photograph his private art collection for insurance purposes. "It's Robert Harrington," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Even I knew that name. Harrington Design was legendary in architectural circles. Their sleek, sustainable buildings redefining skylines across the globe. It was the kind of connection that could elevate my career, so I agreed despite my packed schedule. The Harrington estate overlooked Puget Sound, a modernist masterpiece of glass and reclaimed timber that seemed to float above the water. Rain fell in sheets as I arrived, the Seattle sky a canvas of gray that made the warm lights inside glow like amber. Robert Harrington himself greeted me, a tall, imposing man with silver hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. He led me through rooms filled with museum-quality art, discussing each piece with genuine passion. "My late wife collected these," he explained, his voice softening when he mentioned her. "She had an eye for beauty that transformed everything she touched." I could hear the love in his words, the wound of loss still fresh after years. As we finished the tour, shouting erupted from another wing of the house. Robert's expression shifted to one of resignation. "My daughter," he sighed. "She's having one of her evenings." He led me to a sunken living room, where a young woman stood swaying slightly, an empty champagne flute dangling from her fingers. She was arguing with two well-dressed friends who were trying to get her to leave with them. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, her designer dress slightly askew. Even in that state, something about her commanded attention, a fierce intelligence behind her eyes that contradicted her disheveled appearance. "Sophia," Robert said firmly, "your friends are leaving. Perhaps you should say good night." She turned, noticing us for the first time. "Daddy," she said with exaggerated formality, "always right on time to witness my failures." Her friends used the distraction to make their escape, nodding apologetically to Robert as they left. "This is Ethan Wright," Robert said, gesturing to me, "the photographer I mentioned." Sophia's eyes focused on me with unexpected clarity. "Here to capture our perfect family image?" she asked with a bitter laugh. "Better use a wide-angle lens. We've got secrets that won't fit in a standard frame." I didn't know how to respond, but Robert smoothly intervened. "Ethan, would you mind giving me a moment with my daughter?" I nodded and stepped into the adjacent kitchen, but I could still hear their hushed conversation. "This has to stop, Sophia. Since your mother died—" "Don't bring Mom into this," she interrupted. "I'm allowed to blow off steam." "There's a difference between steam and self-destruction," Robert replied. "You have too much talent to waste it like this." Their voices lowered, and I busied myself examining the stunning kitchen design. A few minutes later, Robert appeared, looking weary. "I apologize for that scene. Sophia is struggling with some things. She's brilliant, graduated top of her class from RISD, has an eye for design that surpasses even her mother's. But since we lost Caroline, she's been adrift." I nodded, unsure why he was sharing this with me. "Actually, Ethan, I have a proposition for you," he continued. "Harrington Design is hosting several important events in the coming weeks. Potential clients, industry leaders, people who could make or break our newest project line. I need Sophia to be there, focused and professional, not like tonight, I finished for him. Exactly. Would you consider accompanying her? As a sort of chaperone? I'd pay you your normal day rate, plus expenses. I nearly refused outright. I wasn't a babysitter, especially not for spoiled heiresses. But then Sophia appeared in the doorway, having exchanged her party dress for jeans and an oversized sweater. Without the glassy look in her eyes, she seemed younger, more vulnerable somehow. "I don't need a handler, Dad," she said quietly. "I can behave when it matters." "Then Mr. Wright's presence won't be an issue," Robert replied smoothly. "He'll be documenting the events anyway." She studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Fine. At least he's not another one of your stuffy lawyers." She turned to me. "Fair warning. I'm not as interesting as my father thinks I am. You'll be bored to tears." I found myself saying, "I doubt that very much, Miss Harrington," before I could stop myself. A hint of a genuine smile touched her lips. "Sophia, please. Miss Harrington makes me sound like I have my life together." And that was how it began. The job that would change everything. The first event was a disaster. Sophia was professional and charming for exactly 45 minutes before she disappeared with a bottle of champagne. I found her on the rooftop terrace, staring at the Seattle skyline. "You're not very good at this chaperone thing," she remarked as I sat beside her. "I'm a photographer, not a bodyguard," I replied. "Besides, you didn't seem to need rescuing. You were holding your own with that developer from Vancouver," she laughed. God, he was insufferable. Tried to mansplain sustainable materials to me after I told him I redesigned our entire production line to reduce carbon footprint. She offered me the bottle. "Want some? I promise I've only had a glass." I surprised myself by taking it. "Your father will fire me if I start drinking on the job." "My father hired you because he's worried I'll embarrass him," she said, suddenly serious. "He thinks I'm still the mess I was after Mom died. I'm not, well, not always." "What happened?" I asked, then quickly added, "if you don't mind me asking." Sophia was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. "Cancer," she finally said. It was quick. 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. I was in my second year at RISD. I came home to say goodbye and went a bit wild afterward. It's been 4 years, and Dad still sees me as that broken girl. Something in her voice resonated with me. "My dad died when I was 10, I found myself saying. Construction accident. It was just me and my mom after that. I rarely shared this with anyone, but something about the night, the city lights below us, made it feel safe." "Is that why you became a photographer?" she asked. "To capture things before they disappear?" Her insight startled me. I never thought of it that way, but maybe. I like that buildings outlast us. They stand as testaments to human creativity, long after their creators are gone. We talked for hours that night, long after the event had ended, about architecture, photography, loss, and the pressure of expectations. By our third event together, we'd developed a routine. She'd work the room professionally for as long as necessary. Then we'd escape to some quiet corner where she'd point out design details others missed, and I'd share stories from my travels. She wasn't at all what I'd first assumed. Beneath her privileged exterior was a woman of extraordinary talent and deeper wounds than she let most people see. 2 months later, Robert called me to his office. I was certain he'd realized our chaperone arrangement had evolved into something more personal. Instead, he smiled and laid out architectural plans on his desk. "We're restoring a historic building in Barcelona," he explained. "Sophia's design." I need photographs that capture both the original elements and our modern interpretations. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. Sophia will be there to guide you through the project. Those 2 weeks in Barcelona changed everything. Away from Seattle, away from Robert's watchful eye and the weight of expectations, Sophia blossomed. She took me through hidden corners of Gaudi's masterpieces, explaining architectural concepts with such passion that I saw the buildings through new eyes. We got lost in narrow streets, ate dinner at midnight like the locals, and talked until dawn on the balcony of our adjoining hotel rooms. On our last night, as we watched the sunrise from Park Güell, Sophia turned to me with uncharacteristic nervousness. "This doesn't have to end when we go back, does it?" I'd been asking myself the same question. My nomadic lifestyle, her complicated relationship with her father, our different worlds. There were a dozen reasons to walk away. But looking at her in the golden light of dawn, I couldn't imagine returning to life without her. "No," I said simply, and kissed her. 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. Robert, after his initial surprise, gave us his blessing. "You bring out something in her I haven't seen since before Caroline died," he told me privately. "A steadiness. Purpose." Our life together wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We bought a loft in an old industrial building that Sophia redesigned into a stunning living and workspace, while respecting its historical bones. I still traveled for work, but less frequently, and sometimes Sophia joined me. When she couldn't, we'd have long video calls where she'd ask me to show her architectural details from whatever city I was in. I'd never felt so connected to anyone. 2 years passed in what felt like moments. Then came the call that changed everything. I was in Chicago, photographing a new skyscraper when Sophia phoned in tears. Robert had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time I made it back to Seattle, he was gone. The weeks that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, legal meetings, and grief. Sophia was named CEO of Harrington Design, thrusting her into a role she'd been groomed for but never truly wanted. I did my best to support her, handling what I could, giving her space when she needed it. But something shifted between us, a distance I couldn't quite bridge. "It's just temporary," I told myself. "She's grieving, adjusting to her new responsibilities." But as weeks stretched into months, the gap widened. Sophia worked later and later. Our conversations became functional rather than intimate. When I tried to discuss it, she'd apologize, blame stress, promise things would improve soon. I believed her because I wanted to, because I remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with in Barcelona and trusted she was still there beneath the grief and pressure. 6 months after Robert's death, I returned early from a Chicago assignment, hoping to surprise Sophia with dinner from her favorite restaurant. Our loft was empty, but I could hear her voice from her home office. She was on the phone, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. "You always know exactly what to say," she was saying, her voice warm and intimate. "I've missed that. Missed you." I froze, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to move. "Tonight won't work," she continued after a pause. "Ethan's coming home tomorrow." I know. Soon, I promise. This is complicated." I must have made a noise because she suddenly appeared in the doorway. Her expression shifting from shock to defensive anger so quickly, it confirmed my worst fears. "You're home early," she said, ending the call without saying goodbye. "Who is that?" I asked, hating how suspicious I sounded but unable to ignore what I'd heard. "A client," she replied too quickly. "The Berlin project. You know how demanding they are." "At 10 p.m.? And since when do you talk to clients about me?" She sighed dramatically. "It's a complicated project, with time zone issues," and I was explaining why I couldn't take their call tomorrow. "Don't make this into something it's not, Ethan." I wanted to believe her. I tried to. But in the weeks that followed, the signs multiplied. Sophia became protective of her phone, stepping away to take calls, changing her passwords. She mentioned a new international collaboration with unusual frequency, but was vague on details. When I asked about joining her on a site visit, she quickly explained why that wouldn't work. Then came the design award ceremony. Harrington Design was nominated for their work on a Singapore sustainable housing complex, Robert's final project. Sophia was tense all evening, checking her phone repeatedly. I assumed it was anxiety about the award until I saw her reaction to a man entering the ballroom. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with the confident air of someone used to commanding attention. Sophia's expression transformed, her eyes brightening, posture straightening, a flush rising to her cheeks. She didn't even realize she'd gripped my arm tighter. "Who's that?" I asked casually. "Victor Ellison," she replied, trying but failing to sound indifferent. "Brilliant architect. Just returned to Seattle after 5 years in Europe." Throughout the evening, I watched them circle each other, exchanging looks across the room. When they finally spoke, the chemistry between them was undeniable, the kind of electric connection that can't be hidden. They talked animatedly about design concepts, finishing each other's sentences, referencing shared experiences I knew nothing about. Later, when we were alone, I asked, "How do you know Victor?" She shrugged. "We were at RISD together. Dated briefly. It wasn't serious. Seemed pretty familiar for not serious." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "God, Ethan, are you jealous?" she snapped. "It was years ago. Ancient history. We're collaborating on the Berlin project, which is why we were catching up." "The Berlin project," I repeated. "The same one you were discussing on the phone that night?" "Yes? Why are you being like this?" "I have enough pressure without you questioning every professional relationship I have." I backed down, apologized even. But the seed of doubt had taken root. Our anniversary fell the following week. I made reservations at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement, arranged to have her favorite flowers delivered to her office. That afternoon, she called to say she couldn't make it. An emergency client dinner she couldn't reschedule. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. You know I'd rather be with you. We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise." I sat alone at our reserved table, nursing a drink and ignoring pitying glances from the staff. When I got home, I found myself doing something I never thought I would, searching through her things. In her desk drawer was a receipt from Altura, an intimate restaurant across town. The date matched our anniversary. The time, 8 p.m., her client dinner. 2 glasses of champagne, 2 entrees, a shared dessert. I sat in the dark of our loft, receipt in hand, as rain lashed against the windows. The Seattle skyline blurred through my tears. This was how lies began. Small discrepancies, reasonable explanations, the slow erosion of trust. I'd seen it happen to friends, had photographed enough empty, echoing spaces that once held families to recognize the warning signs. 3 weeks later, I was scheduled for a photography assignment in Japan, a 3-week project documenting traditional versus modern architectural elements. The night before my departure, Sophia was unusually attentive, even passionate. It made me question my suspicions. Maybe I'd misread everything. Maybe the pressures of her new role, her grief over Robert, had temporarily changed her, but she was finding her way back to me. "I'll miss you," she whispered as we lay in bed. 3 weeks is too long. I almost canceled my trip then and there. But something, intuition, self-preservation, call it what you will, stopped me. Instead, I kissed her and said, "I love you. We'll video chat every day." The next morning, I pretended to leave for the airport. Instead, I went to my studio downtown and called Marco, a former client who worked in security. I'd photographed his company's headquarters the previous year, and we'd stayed in touch. Without giving details, I asked if he could help me access my home security system remotely, claiming I was worried about a potential leak in our absence. "No problem," he said. "Your system has cloud backup. I'll send you the access details." For 2 days, nothing unusual happened. Sophia left for work, returned late, ordered takeout. On the 3rd day, she came home early, Spent an hour changing clothes and preparing dinner. At 7:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Victor Ellison entered carrying wine and flowers. They ate at our dining table, listened to the jazz records I'd given Sophia for her birthday, and eventually moved to our bedroom, the camera feed ending in the hallway, but leaving little doubt about what followed. I watched it all from a sterile hotel room, physically ill with the confirmation of my worst fears. After hours of alternating between rage and devastation, I booked a flight home. I needed to confront them, to hear the truth from Sophia's lips, to understand how someone I'd trusted completely could betray me so thoroughly. When I arrived at our loft the next evening, it was empty. Evidence of Victor remained, his distinctive cologne lingering in the air, architectural sketches on Sophia's desk with notes in his handwriting, 2 wine glasses by our bed. I called Sophia, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. "Ethan?" she answered, sounding startled. "Aren't you in Japan?" "I think we both know I'm not," I replied coldly. "Where are you?" "At the office," she said quickly. "Working late on the Singapore revisions." "Stop lying, Sophia. I know about Victor. I know everything." The line went silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she whispered, "I can explain." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone," she pleaded. "Please, Ethan. Let me come home. We can talk about this." Despite everything, a small part of me hoped there was an explanation, some context that would make sense of the betrayal. Fine. "How long?" "An hour," she said. "I'm leaving now. Please just wait for me." I paced our loft, rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm despite the storm inside me. An hour passed. Then 2. I called repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Around midnight, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Ethan Wright?" a formal voice asked. "Yes." "This is Harborview Medical Center. Your wife, Sophia Harrington Wright, has been in an accident." The world tilted beneath me. Whatever anger I felt vanished, replaced by cold fear. Is she alive?" "Yes, but she's in serious condition. You should come right away." I broke every traffic law getting to the hospital, my mind racing with scenarios. Had she been so upset by our conversation that she'd driven recklessly? Was this somehow my fault for confronting her? Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. At the hospital, I was met by Marcus Chen, Robert's longtime legal advisor and Sophia's godfather. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his expression grave. "Ethan," he said, blocking my path to the information desk. "Before you go in, there's something you need to know." "Just tell me if she's okay," I demanded. "Physically, she'll recover. Some lacerations, a concussion, a broken wrist." But what?" Marcus hesitated. "The head trauma caused complications. Sophia is experiencing memory loss." I felt a surge of relief that quickly turned to confusion as Marcus continued. "She doesn't remember the past 3 years, Ethan. She doesn't remember your marriage." The words didn't make sense at first. "That's not possible. Selective amnesia like that isn't. The doctors say it's rare, but not unheard of with traumatic brain injuries. Certain periods can be affected while others remain intact." Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, but she's been asking for Victor. She remembers him from before you." I pushed past Marcus toward Sophia's room, desperate to see for myself. When I opened the door, Victor was already there, sitting beside her bed, holding her uninjured hand. Sophia's face was bruised, her left wrist in a cast, but it was the look in her eyes that devastated me. Blank recognition, as if I were a stranger she was trying to place. "Ethan," Marcus said from behind me, "you shouldn't be here right now." "He's my husband," Sophia said slowly, looking at Victor for confirmation. "That's what they told me." Victor nodded, his expression a perfect mask of concern. Yes, sweetheart. You married 2 years ago. Sophia turned back to me, her eyes apologetic but distant. I'm sorry. They say I'll remember eventually, but right now, there's nothing there. The last clear memory I have is from 3 years ago, working on the Singapore project with Victor before he left for Europe. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Her words sounded rehearsed, her confusion too convenient. Or was I being paranoid, letting my discovery of her affair color my reaction to a genuine medical crisis? Could I have a moment alone with my wife? I asked. Victor started to protest, but Sophia squeezed his hand. It's okay. Just a few minutes. When we were alone, I approached her bed cautiously. Sophia, what happened tonight? I was driving home from the office, she recited. It was raining. A car swerved into my lane near the Aurora Bridge. I don't remember the impact. You were coming to meet me, I said. We spoke on the phone. You said you could explain about Victor. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? Before she shook her head slightly. I don't remember any call. The doctors say I might never recover those memories. I'm sorry this is happening to you, to us. But I can't pretend to feel something I don't remember feeling. 3 years, I said quietly. Barcelona. Our wedding at sunset. The loft renovation. Your father's passing. None of it? She looked down at her hands. They're like stories about someone else's life. I recognize the events, but not my place in them. She glanced up, and for a second, I thought I saw the real Sophia, my Sophia, behind the performance. Maybe it's better this way. A clean break. Before I could respond, nurses entered to administer medication, and I was asked to leave. In the hallway, Marcus was waiting with a manila envelope. Temporary power of attorney papers, he explained. Until Sophia recovers, someone needs to manage her affairs, her medical decisions, given the circumstances. Given that she doesn't remember me, you mean, I finished bitterly. And I suppose Victor is the logical choice? Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. He's been her friend for over a decade, Ethan, and right now, she trusts him. The doctors say familiarity is important for recovery. I wanted to scream that this was all too convenient, that I'd discovered their affair just hours before this mysterious accident. But would anyone believe me? Would it sound like the desperate accusations of a jealous husband? Instead, I asked to speak to her doctors. The neurologist, a compassionate woman named Dr. Patel, explained that while Sophia's pattern of memory loss was unusual, it wasn't impossible. Traumatic brain injuries are unpredictable, she said. The mind sometimes protects itself by compartmentalizing trauma. In rare cases, this can manifest as memory loss around specific periods or relationships. And there's no way to prove or disprove this? I asked. Dr. Patel hesitated. Memory is subjective, Mr. Wright. We can perform cognitive tests, brain scans, but ultimately, we have to take the patient's experience at face value. I spent the night in the hospital waiting room, unable to leave but not allowed back into Sophia's room. The next morning, Marcus reappeared with another envelope, legal papers initiating divorce proceedings. This isn't her decision, I protested. She's injured, confused. Sophia is still legally competent, Marcus replied. Her memory loss doesn't affect her ability to make current decisions, only her recall of past events. She feels it's unfair to remain married to someone she doesn't remember loving. This is insane, I said. We had a life together, a home, plans for the future. She can't just erase all that because it's inconvenient. Marcus's expression softened slightly. I've known Sophia since she was born, Ethan. I'm not taking sides here. But regardless of how or why this happened, she's made her decision. Fighting it will only cause more pain for everyone. Included with the divorce papers was a settlement offer minus $100,000 in exchange for walking away quickly and quietly. No claims against Harrington Design, No contest of the prenuptial agreement. I nearly tore it up on the spot. Then I remembered something. A clause in our prenuptial stating that if either party was unfaithful, they forfeited $5 million to the wronged spouse. Sophia's inheritance from Robert would be untouched, but for someone like Victor, $5 million would be significant. The accident, the amnesia, the rushed divorce. Suddenly, it all made horrible sense. This wasn't about love or even lust. It was about money and the desperate attempt to avoid consequences. When I refused the settlement, Marcus's tone changed. Be reasonable, Ethan. Sophia's condition is fragile. A prolonged legal battle could impede her recovery. Besides, there are other considerations. What considerations? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. Sophia has mentioned certain incidents, patterns of controlling behavior that made her afraid to leave the marriage normally. Nothing she's prepared to formalize into accusations yet, but I was stunned. She's claiming I was abusive? That's a lie, and you know it, Marcus. I'm simply conveying information, he replied smoothly. These things can become complicated when emotions run high. The $100,000 offer is generous given the short duration of the marriage and the prenuptial terms. I suggest you consider it carefully. The threat was clear. Take the money and disappear, or face not only the loss of my marriage, but potentially my reputation and career as well. I left the hospital in a daze, returning to the loft that no longer felt like home. Sophia had officially filed for divorce, claiming her condition made it impossible to remain married to a stranger. She moved back to the Harrington estate, with Victor taking up residence in the guest house to help with her recovery. I might have given up if not for two things. First, I knew the truth. I'd seen them together before the accident. Second, I remembered the woman I married, the real Sophia beneath the lies. She deserved better than Victor, even if she no longer wanted me. I hired Alex Rivera, a private investigator recommended by a journalist friend. Find out exactly what happened the night of the accident, I told him, and anything you can about Victor Ellison's sudden return to Seattle. Alex was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered a trail of evidence that confirmed my suspicions. Sophia had not been alone in the car that night. Traffic camera footage showed Victor behind the wheel moments before the accident. Medical records had been altered. The responding paramedic paid to change his report. Most damning of all, Victor had returned to Seattle immediately after Robert's death, though he'd only appeared publicly months later. He came back for the money, Alex explained. Ellison's European career was failing. He was in debt. He'd stayed in touch with Sophia over the years, emails, texts. When her father died, he saw an opportunity. The picture that emerged was calculated and cold. Victor had deliberately rekindled his relationship with the vulnerable Sophia during her grief. When their affair was discovered, they'd staged the accident and memory loss to circumvent the prenuptial agreement and allow them to begin their relationship publicly without scandal. As this evidence accumulated, I felt sick rather than vindicated. How could the woman I loved participate in such a scheme? Had I ever truly known her? One night, alone in our loft, Sophia had formally asked me to vacate, but I'd delayed, unable to let go. I was packing books when I knocked over her design desk. A hidden compartment I'd never noticed before sprang open, revealing a leather-bound journal. I knew I shouldn't read it, that some boundaries should remain sacred even in betrayal. But I needed answers more than I needed moral high ground. The journal entries spanned the past year, charting Sophia's grief after Robert's death, her struggles with running Harrington Design, and eventually Victor's return. Reading her private thoughts felt invasive, but I couldn't stop. I needed to understand how we'd gone from Barcelona sunrises to elaborate deceptions. Victor came back, one entry read. After all these years, after he left me for Milan without even saying goodbye. He says he never stopped loving me, that his career took him away, but his heart stayed here. I wanted to hate him, but seeing him brought back everything. The passion, the intensity we had before Dad interfered. Before Ethan, later entries revealed her conflicted feelings. Ethan deserves better than this double life. He's good and steady, and has never been anything but supportive. But with him, I feel like I'm playing a role. The dutiful daughter, the responsible CEO, the perfect wife. With Victor, I'm just Sophia. Messy, creative, alive. Why can't I have that freedom without hurting anyone? The final entry before the accident chilled me. Victor says we need a clean break. The prenup would financially ruin him, and the scandal would damage Harrington Design just as we're expanding internationally. He has a plan, but it scares me. Is this really who I've become? Someone who would lie so completely to escape consequences? But I can't lose Victor again. And perhaps this way Ethan can hate me cleanly instead of being destroyed slowly by my betrayal. Sometimes the kindest cut is the quickest. I sat on the floor of our loft, surrounded by memories and shattered trust, clutching her journal as rain lashed the windows. The woman who wrote these words wasn't a monster. She was human, flawed, caught between duty and desire, making terrible choices to resolve impossible conflicts. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. And in understanding, I found a path forward. Have you ever discovered someone's true feelings in an unexpected way? Those moments when you glimpse behind someone's carefully constructed facade and see their raw, unfiltered thoughts? It's both devastating and clarifying, like finally understanding why a photograph never quite captured what you saw with your naked eye. Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe if you know what it's like to have the ground shift beneath your feet when you least expect it. The next day, I called Lena, a designer who had worked closely with Sophia at Harrington Design. She had contacted me after the accident, expressing concern about the official story. Over coffee, she confirmed what I'd suspected. Victor had pursued Sophia relentlessly after Robert's death, positioning himself as both her past love and her future salvation. He told everyone they were destined to be together, Lena explained. That you were just a placeholder while she grieved her mother and pleased her father. Some of us tried to defend you, remind her how happy she'd been, but Victor was persuasive. Lena had saved text messages from Sophia discussing the affair, messages that clearly showed Victor's financial motivations and their plan to handle the Ethan situation. Armed with this evidence, along with Alex's findings, I arranged a meeting with Sophia, Victor, and their legal team. The conference room at Harrington Design felt both familiar and foreign. I'd photographed it for their company brochure just a year earlier. Sophia entered wearing dark glasses, her arm still in a light brace, Victor hovering protectively beside her. Marcus and two other attorneys flanked them, expressions carefully neutral. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Marcus began formally. "We're hoping to reach an amicable—" "Before we start," I interrupted, "I'd like to speak directly to Sophia, without legal filters." Sophia glanced at Victor, then nodded slightly. "What do you want to say?" I had rehearsed this moment, planned to present my evidence immediately, but seeing her, still beautiful, despite everything, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in Barcelona, I took a different approach. "Do you remember the first morning in Park Güell?" I asked softly. The light was perfect. Golden hour photographers dream about. You were explaining Gaudi's use of organic forms, how architecture could mimic nature without copying it. You said, "The best designs don't fight their environment. They reveal what was always meant to be there." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, pain, I couldn't tell. You were wearing that blue linen dress with paint stains on the sleeve because you'd been sketching ideas the night before. Your hair was still damp from the shower, curling at the ends the way it always does in humidity. When I showed you the photographs later, you said they didn't capture how it felt to be there. And I said, that's why I need you. I capture how things look. You capture how they feel. She finished automatically, then froze, realizing her mistake. Victor tensed beside her. Sophia, you don't have to play along with this. Your doctors advised against forcing memories. I ignored him, keeping my eyes on Sophia. The night your father died, you couldn't sleep. We sat on the roof deck until dawn, and you told me about the treehouse he built you when you were 7. How you'd hide there during thunderstorms because you liked watching lightning from behind glass. You said it made you feel safe but still connected to the wildness outside. Tears formed in her eyes, but she remained silent. I know you remember, Sophia, I said gently. I know about the accident, about Victor driving, about the elaborate plan to avoid the prenuptial clause. I have evidence, traffic camera footage, medical record discrepancies, witness statements, your own journal entries. The room went completely still. Marcus cleared his throat. These are serious allegations, Ethan. If you have actual evidence, we should... It's not about the evidence, I interrupted. It's about the truth. About having the courage to face consequences, even painful ones. I turned back to Sophia. I didn't come here for money or revenge. I came because the woman I married, the real Sophia, wouldn't want to live a life built on lies, no matter how convenient they might be. Sophia removed her dark glasses, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. For the first time since the accident, she was looking at me without pretense. Victor placed a hand on her arm. Don't let him manipulate you, he urged. We can fight these baseless claims. Baseless? I laughed humorlessly, finally turning to Victor. Should we start with the traffic camera footage showing you behind the wheel that night? Or perhaps the bank transfers to the paramedic who changed his report. Or maybe your creditors in Europe who were magically paid off after you reconnected with Sophia? Victor's expression shifted from concern to calculation. Sophia made her choice, he said coldly. Whatever happened before the accident is irrelevant now. Legally, her current state is what matters. Her current state is a lie, I replied. And you know it. You both do. Sophia stood suddenly, shaking off Victor's hand. Stop. Just stop. Her voice was quiet but firm. I can't do this anymore. The lawyers exchanged alarmed glances as Sophia turned to Victor. He's right. This was your plan, not mine. I went along with it because I was afraid of scandal, of losing you again, of facing what I'd done. But I can't build a life on this foundation. Victor's concern transformed to anger. You're being emotional. Think about what's at stake here. I am thinking, she replied. For the first time in months, I'm really thinking. She turned to the lawyers. I want the room cleared. Just Ethan and me. Despite protests, eventually everyone left. When we were alone, Sophia sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I remember everything, she admitted. Every moment. Barcelona. Our wedding. The fights about my work schedule. The night Dad died. Meeting Victor again at that fundraiser. The accident. She looked up at me, tears flowing freely now. I'm so sorry, Ethan. It's not enough. I know that. But I am. Why? I asked. The simple question containing all my hurt, all my confusion. She was quiet for a long moment. After Dad died, I felt trapped. By the company, by expectations, by the person I thought I needed to be. Victor represented an escape. Back to who I was, before responsibilities and grief narrowed my world. He reminded me of a time when I felt free. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. It was selfish and destructive, and I knew it was wrong even as I was doing it. The amnesia scheme was his idea, but I agreed to it. I convinced myself it was cleaner, kinder somehow than admitting I'd betrayed you. And now? I asked. Now I realize there's nothing kind about lying to someone who trusted you completely. she said simply. You deserved better, Ethan. You still do. In that moment, I saw her clearly, not the idealized woman I'd fallen in love with, nor the villain who'd betrayed me, but a complex human being capable of both profound connection and profound mistakes. What happens next is up to you, I said finally. I have enough evidence to challenge the divorce terms based on the infidelity clause, but I'm willing to negotiate a fair settlement without making the details public. Harrington Design was your father's legacy. I don't want to damage that. She looked surprised. Why would you protect the company after everything? Because despite everything, I know how much it mattered to Robert. And to you, when you weren't trying to escape it. I gathered my documents. My lawyer will contact Marcus to discuss terms. As I turned to leave, Sophia called after me. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I paused at the door. I don't know. But I hope someday I'll understand it better than I do now. That's the closest thing to forgiveness I can offer right now. The legal proceedings that followed were remarkably civilized. With the pretense of amnesia abandoned, we negotiated a settlement that acknowledged the infidelity without invoking the full penalty of the prenuptial agreement. Sophia publicly stepped back from Harrington Design for 6 months, citing the need to recover from her accident, but in reality taking time to reevaluate her life and leadership. Victor, once he realized the financial windfall he'd anticipated wasn't coming, quickly disappeared back to Europe. As for me, I sold the loft. Too many memories haunted its spaces, and accepted a long-term assignment documenting historical architecture across Japan. Distance helped. New perspectives helped more. 6 months after our settlement, I held my first major gallery exhibition, a series called Foundations that traced the evolution of certain buildings from concept to completion. I didn't invite Sophia, but she came anyway. These are extraordinary, she said, standing before a triptych showing the renovation of a traditional Japanese temple. You've always had talent, but there's something different here, a deeper understanding. Rebuilding teaches you things construction never could, I replied. She nodded, understanding the metaphor. Are you happy, Ethan? In Japan? I'm finding my way there, I said honestly. It's a process. You? Getting there, she said. I'm back at Harrington full-time, but differently. Dad wanted me to lead because I was his daughter, but I'm doing it my way now. We're focusing on sustainable community projects, affordable housing innovations. Robert would be proud, I said, and meant it. I hope so, she hesitated. I'm seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I sabotage the things that matter. It doesn't excuse anything, but it helps me make sure I never hurt someone that way again. We stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by images of structures that had endured centuries of storms and earthquakes, always finding new purpose. I should go, she said finally. I just wanted to see your work, to say congratulations. I nodded. Thank you for coming. As she turned to leave, I found myself asking, was any of it real? Us? She stopped, her expression softening with something like grief. All of it was real, Ethan. That's what makes it so sad. I didn't betray a man I didn't love. I betrayed the one person who saw me clearly and loved me anyway. With that, she left, and I returned to studying my photographs, images of beautiful things built, destroyed, and carefully reconstructed. Not the same as before, but solid in their new incarnations. As I moved through the gallery, I realized I no longer felt the raw wound of betrayal, just the quieter ache of something valuable lost, and the cautious hope of new foundations being laid. What would you do if you discovered someone you loved had created an elaborate lie to avoid taking responsibility? Would you expose them or walk away? There's no simple answer, is there? Each betrayal carries its own specific weight, and each path to healing follows its own twisting course. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our experiences is the first step toward rebuilding what felt irreparably broken.